Welcome back to Evo 1. Today I'm going to teach you how to set up a tubeless tire system. Now the bike that I am working on has never had tubeless before, so I think it's going to be a prime example for you to follow along, do it at home, and get your tubeless setup done correct the first time. The very first step in this process is making an inventory of parts to ensure that you have the correct components. Now, tubeless tires are always recommended on a bike. Usually it says TR, tubeless ready, something to that equivalent on the side of your tire. If not, check with the manufacturer and make sure that those tires are tubeless compatible. The next thing that we need is tubeless rim tape. Now, tubeless rim tape, generally you want to get it as close as you can to that inner width of your rim, but sometimes we just don't have the right size on hand. I'm actually going to show you today, as a little bonus in this video, exactly how I trim it up if it is a little bit too wide for the wheel that I'm trying to convert to tubeless. Another thing that we need is tubeless tire sealant. I highly recommend Joe's No Flats. They are a sponsor of this channel, and I also really just love their products. The next thing is tubeless valves. Now, my biggest piece of advice here is there are a lot of small components, especially when it comes to tubeless valves, so make sure you keep all of those in a secure spot. If you don't, these little parts, they can definitely just walk off on you and, unfortunately, disappear. Now that we have all of our components together and we've verified that we have all the correct ones, we want to go ahead and take our wheels off the bike. I'm going to start with the front wheel because I feel like it is the most simple, and we want to go ahead and let the air out. We're going to go ahead and unscrew this little top nut off the Presta valve, get it out of there, and then we're going to want to break the bead on this tire. I highly suggest getting a large trash can. It makes it a lot easier to get leverage, especially when going all the way around this thing. Now that we have our wheel placed on a trash can, or if you're doing this bench top, the concept is fairly the same, or you can do it in your lap. Now, we're going to want to go around the tire, and we're going to push down until we start to feel that bead break, and we get the tire down into what is called the drop center of the wheel. Once we have broken the bead on this tire, we can actually take a tire lever, or if you've got the grip strength, you can do it by hand, but tire lever suggested. And we're going to go ahead and put that in there, the opposite side of the valve stem, and work that tire lever away from you, not towards you, because you don't want to punch yourself in the face. That hurts. I've done it. So we're going to get that around. We're going to go ahead and relocate our valve stem. Grab the opposite end right here. And sometimes you can actually just lift that up and over. Simple as that. One little thing that I want to point out here is if you have tubes that are still good, it might be a wise idea to keep them. This is a 29, for example, and I can actually stuff this into a wheel as far down as a 24 inch and get by for a few rides. So just think about it, but don't be a hoarder. A key mistake that I see a lot of people make when converting to tubeless is actually leaving their old rim tape in place. Now, to some extent, I'm sure with sealant, especially something like Joe's, floating around in here, maybe it'll seal, but get a little pick. These are literally Harbor Freight free, spend more than 50 bucks, you get a free tool. I always choose the picks because I break them, and pop that rim tape off. Now, you'll see why we're doing this here in a second, but if you can't see already, there's a bunch of gunk on here, and that's actually intrusion from stuff coming outside of your spokes and getting down into the rim. So you want this out of here so we can create an airtight seal, because right now, this is not airtight. So because I made the mistake of thinking that this wheel and tire setup was going to be perfectly clean, because this bike has literally had like 3 rides on it, I'm going to have to clean it. Now, I highly suggest isopropyl alcohol. You can get into using like brake clean, all sorts of different chemicals, but alcohol, you probably already have this in a first aid kit somewhere. Works fantastic, takes everything off, especially sticky residue. Little cloth, and just go around the wheel and start cleaning up any of that dirt and debris that you might find on there. For this next step, I highly recommend meditating, doing some yoga, doing something to bring your blood pressure down, because it's going to get frustrating. I'm not going to lie to you. Now, this rim tape that I'm using is a 27 millimeter. The measurement on the inside of this wheel is slightly less than that. I could measure, but I'm just not going to grab the tool. because I want to show you realistically what it's going to look like whenever you go to do this there at home yourself. So start off by taking some of your rim tape, and you definitely want to go towards the side of your rim, and you want to get it as far over as you possibly can, and just start laying down probably, I don't know, 5-6 inches maybe. And then I'm going to bring that camera in and show you exactly what I'm going to do, and we're going to follow this process the entire way around the wheel. Since this rim tape is a little bit wider than the wheel, the goal here is going to be getting it tucked up underneath where that bead is going to actually meet the rim as close as I possibly can, right? So you're gonna have to kind of come in, get it over just a little bit, and if you see right here as we're starting to crease, that tells me I have a little bit too much tape out. So I'm going to spool that back up, gonna come back in here, make sure I'm seating that tape all the way to where it looks literally like just a logoed up version of the rim, same contours and everything. And then the next part is going to be pushing down in this middle portion just a little bit until I can get this other side to match just the same. Now, of course, I will come back and tidy up this, usually using a thumb. That gets it nice and tight, as you can see right there. But then come right back and get these sections, because if it's not perfectly against the spoke holes, that's not as big of a deal. What we're worried about is air escaping, especially here where that tire bead is gonna sit and that tape is gonna meet. You want that on each side to be absolutely airtight. Now you're gonna wanna take your time with this. Like I said, it's gonna be a pain. It's not gonna be fun, but we're after an airtight seal. So just take your time and be patient. We've reached another area where I think a lot of people also make mistakes, and that is whenever you find that your rim tape is about to hit your tape that you started on, so you've made it all the way around the wheel. What I like to do here is I like to go past it, 5 inches maybe, and then I like to cut this rim tape at maybe 50, 45 degrees, somewhere in that neighborhood, just so I don't have a perfectly flat seam or a perfectly square seam. And then I want to get that set as good as I possibly can. Again, making sure to keep with that inner contour of the rim and ride the bead. And then most rim tape, if not all, comes with these little stickers. Sometimes they have brand names on them, sometimes they don't. These do not, which I actually enjoy because it's less obnoxious than the brand that does it. And you're going to take this, find that seam that you just put in there. Okay, so this has never happened to me in the history of me ever doing rim tape, but I got it lined up so good that there is like a millimeter of difference between the text that reads across the wheel. So that was a little difficult to find. There it is. I just lost it again. You're going to want to follow pretty much the exact same process for inserting that sticker in there. And make sure that it covers up as much of where you trimmed as possible, and also tuck it in behind that bead. That way it doesn't create a small little air gap or an area where your bead can't seat correctly. And just get that sticker on there good and tight. Simple as that. This is the hardest part. So if you've had patience enough to work through this, again, it's going to take a few tries. Rim tape is one of those areas where it's really forgiving. It's kind of like if you've ever applied like paint protection film or tint, you can generally pull it on and off a few different times until you get it correct. So just take your time. It's not the most fun or luxurious or glamorous thing to do on a bike, but it's going to make a huge difference in how this bike performs. For some reason, it is also a pretty big sticking point, no pun intended since we just did sticky rim tape, but I've seen people take like an X-Acto knife and cut like a 45 where the valve hole is. I just take a little screwdriver and I go through the valve side, making sure not to, obviously poke so much so that I lift a bunch of that tape off, but I like to do that, kind of cause a little bit of like a stretch mark on it. That tells me where my valve hole is at. And then I go from the other side and pop it through. I mean, that's the simplest way that I found to do it. I find that whenever you cut it at like a 45 or you make an X, it leaves these little triangle shaped tags that sometimes that air can bleed past those tags because they create a little fold in them because you're literally round peg in a square hole back into a round, if that makes sense. And I just don't want to ever have to risk that happening. So screwdriver, if you let it kind of waller a little bit in there, it creates a nice round little area for everything to sit into without leaving those small little jackets for air to eventually leak from and sealant. So do it this way, easy. Now we are finally at my favorite part of installation. It's going to be installing the valve stem itself. The valve stems generally come assembled. You're going to have an O-ring, you're going to have a top nut that's going to tighten this valve to the wheel and kind of sandwich the wheel in between it, and you're going to have your top cap. Now, make sure that you have the conical washer installed depending on what type of wheel you're running. On my enduro bike, I do run Cush Core, so it has a different style of O-ring, and you might be in that exact same scenario. But the goal here is going to be to get this through without crushing, folding, or damaging the tape, like I mentioned a second ago. Now, if you push this through, and the moment it starts to go, you can kind of start hearing that tape a little bit, stop. What you can do is take a little dab of tire sealant and just lightly lube this little conical O-ring, just slightly. Make sure you also don't get a bunch of grit in there because that'll create an issue later on down the line. But that's going to act as a lubricant to kind of help that little O-ring seat in there, and there we go. Now, take your O-ring, you're going to slide that onto the valve, and there's two schools of thought. You can honestly just shove it on there. I like to roll it because it has less of a chance of actually damaging the O-ring against the threads that are on that valve stem. And then we're going to take our top cap, thread it all the way down, about the longest valves I possibly could. Just paid no attention, I just threw them in the Amazon cart. And then I like to go finger tight at first, just so I can watch and see how much it's going to drag down that rim tape. Again, patience. Do not crush your rim tape because it will literally, you'll go to seat this thing and you'll have air leaking out of the rim, out of a valve or a spoke or nipple hole, and you won't be able to find the leak, and you're going to have a slow leak over time. It's just going to drive you nuts. So take your time, be patient, make sure that everything is fitting in there square, and you'll see it start to walk that valve core into the wheel. Perfect. And so once it's sitting pretty much flush with the rim, you should be good to go. And now we're going to go ahead and mount our tire. Tire mounting, fairly simple. I like to take my bike, I like to look at what side the rotors are on, which is going to be this side. So the wheel needs to rotate that way to go forward. So find your tire, make sure it's directional. Yep, so rolling forward would be that way. And I like to take the wheel, set it literally, set the bead into the rim, kind of like that. Get it in that drop center, lay it down, tire lever, come right up and over. This one might be loose enough just to push it over myself, and pop it on there. So I have the bead on this tire about 70% the way on, and it gets really, really tight when trying to use a tire lever. A lot of people don't know this trick, but use the drop center. Go over here, get the tire off the edge of the rim into the drop center, and it's going to give you more tire to work with on this side to the point at which you can probably literally do this by hand. Now, leave this little bit of a gap, because that's where we're going to add our tire sealant. To add our tubeless tire sealant into the tire, we want to go ahead and shake it up, get all of those little granules agitated and dispensed throughout the liquid. So we'll get that good and shaken up, pop the cap, and yes, there are absolute recommendations on how much sealant to add. Do I follow them? Kinda. So go ahead, in that little area that we left, This is really helpful for whenever you have a trash can, which is why I recommend it. Go ahead, and I generally like to add about, I don't know, 60 milliliters-ish of sealant, especially if it's a brand new tire. And so once we've got that in there, go ahead and check our level, which that's actually another reason why I really like these Joe's No Flats bottles, is I can actually tell how much sealant I'm adding. I'm not just guesstimating or having to put it in a graduated cylinder. And then from there, take a tire lever and snap that bead the rest of the way on. When it comes to doing tubeless tire seating, there's a couple different schools of thought. I prefer the lazy way. I don't take the valve core out, I leave it in, because why not? And I'm not going to sit there with a pump, and I don't own a compressor. I don't have the cardio to pump this tire up. I would be completely out of breath, especially for moving from Texas to Denver. Yeah, not gonna happen. So, CO2, make sure that there is no obvious gaps. I mean, if it's an obvious gap, it'll still probably seat, but just make sure, especially around the valve stem itself, because that's where most of the air is gonna rush in. So you're gonna seal from here, and then the rest of the way around. Then all we're gonna do is say a quick prayer. And simple as that. Easy. Once you have that tire seated and everything seems to seal, you will definitely hear some small leaks. My best advice is give the tire a few spins, some bounces, or even go ride the bike. I still do this even before I ride. Then I'll top it back up with air. I usually go a little bit higher than what I normally run for pressure because I know some air is still going to leak out, but that should give you a pretty solid baseline. Now, other than that, go ahead and get this thing mounted back up on the bike, go give it a spin, get that sealant worked all the way around. Again, bounces do really, really help. It kind of helps jostle that sealant around in places that just rolling won't get it, unless you're obviously kind of rolling quick. But yeah, it's looking good to me. I'm happy with it, and I hope you learned something today. As always, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you watching, and if you have any questions or comments, drop them down below. I would love to talk to you, and I will see you on the next video.